He was 52, broke, tired, selling milkshake machines from the trunk of his car. But one strange phone call would lead him to build a global empire by taking something that wasn't even his. This is the story of how Ray Kroc didn't start McDonald's, but made it his. He was 52, not young enough to dream recklessly, not old enough to give up completely, but stuck somewhere in between. Most of his friends had settled down, built something, or at the very least, accepted the shape of their lives. But Ray Kroc, he was still chasing. On a warm spring afternoon in 1954, he pulled over on the side of a dusty Illinois highway, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of his beat-up car. In the trunk, 5 chrome-plated milkshake machines, polished but unsold. For the 5th time that day, he stepped into a roadside diner, introduced himself with a tired but practiced smile, and offered his pitch. Ever heard of the multi-mixer? It can make 5 milkshakes at once. Revolutionary stuff. The owner, like so many before, barely looked up from the grill. No thanks. We've got what we need. Another door closed. Another day wasted. Another dent in the armor. Back in the car, Ray sat in silence for a moment. His hands gripped the steering wheel, but he didn't start the engine. Instead, he stared out at the road, the sun low and blinding on the horizon. For a brief second he thought of turning around, going home to his wife, Ethel, who had long stopped asking how many machines he'd sold that week. Their conversations had grown quieter. The spark that once lit their evenings had dimmed under years of disappointment. Ethel, ever practical, had tried to be supportive, but Ray could feel it. The heaviness in her voice, the quiet judgment in her silence. He had chased too many ideas, and none had stuck. "You're not 30 anymore, Ray," she'd said one night, folding laundry without looking up. "Maybe it's time to settle." He didn't respond. He couldn't, because what if she was right? But somewhere, buried under the weight of all his failures, was a voice. It wasn't loud, but it was stubborn. Not yet. That voice kept him going. Kept him cold-calling diners, shaking hands, facing rejection after rejection. It wasn't about the mixer. It wasn't even about the money. It was about something deeper. A belief that he was meant for more. That his story hadn't been written yet. And then one day it happened. In the middle of a sluggish afternoon at his small office, Ray's secretary called out, "Ray, there's a strange order here. Someone wants 6 multi-mixers." He raised an eyebrow. "6? That's gotta be a mistake." "Nope," she said, handing him the paper. "San Bernardino, California, a place called McDonald's." Ray stared at the form in his hand, heart skipping a beat. No one ever ordered 6 machines, not even chains. He reread the address, looked again at the name. Something about it felt different. He folded the form slowly and slid it into his jacket pocket. That night, he couldn't sleep. Lying in bed next to Ethel, staring at the ceiling, he whispered to himself, "Who the hell are these McDonald's guys?" He didn't know it yet. But that slip of paper, that tiny diner in California, and that one strange order would be the spark that changed everything. Because sometimes all it takes is one door to open when the rest of the world has slammed shut. And Ray Kroc? He was finally about to walk through it. The road from Illinois to San Bernardino was long, dry, and uneventful. Ray Kroc made the trip in silence, his thoughts louder than the radio. In his jacket pocket, the strange order form rested like a loaded question. Why would anyone need 6 milkshake machines? By the time he arrived at 1398 North E Street, the sun was already sliding behind the California hills. Ray pulled into the small parking lot, not sure what to expect. What he saw stunned him. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. In fact, the building looked almost too simple, like a model home for a future suburb. White exterior, trimmed in red, No indoor seating, no waiters, just two golden arches rising from each side like open arms, and a walk-up window with a line of families stretching out onto the pavement. Ray stepped out of the car and stood still for a moment, letting the scene sink in. The smell of fries hung in the air. Kids laughed. Orders moved fast, shockingly fast. No one seemed to wait more than 30 seconds. He watched a teenage boy in a red cap take 3 steps to the left, grab 2 burgers, then 2 more steps to the right. Fries, drink, done. Bag sealed, customer gone. Next. It's not a restaurant, Ray muttered to himself, eyes wide. It's a factory. He made his way to the back, found the office, and introduced himself to the men behind the name, Richard and Maurice McDonald. They weren't what Ray expected. No suits, no sales pitch. Just 2 modest, soft-spoken brothers in aprons who smiled with a kind of tired pride. They welcomed Ray, sat him down, and explained their creation with the casual confidence of inventors who didn't quite know what they had built. They called it the Speedy Service System, a revolutionary model for preparing food that stripped away everything unnecessary. No waiters, no menus, no dishes, just burgers, fries, shakes, fast. Dick pulled out a pencil and sketched the kitchen on a napkin. Stations, paths, prep lines, all measured for minimal movement and maximum output. Ray leaned in, mesmerized. This, he said, this is the future. The brothers shrugged. They had tried franchising once before, but it didn't work. Quality slipped, standards dropped. They'd given up on expansion and focused on just running the best little burger joint in California. Ray couldn't believe what he was hearing. You don't understand, he told them. You've built a system, not just a restaurant, a model. And models can be replicated. Mac looked hesitant. Franchising sounds like a headache we don't need. But Ray's voice was calm, persuasive. Let me do it. Let me handle the franchising. I'll take your system, your name, your vision, and build it the way you meant it to be. He left San Bernardino that night with more than a handshake. He left with a mission. Back in his motel room, Ray opened his suitcase and spread out a map of the United States. He stared at it like a general before a war. Small red dots appeared in his mind. McDonald's here, and here, and here. Every city, every town. Same burger, same fries, same smile. He picked up the phone. Not to call Ethel, not yet. He wasn't ready to explain it. Because how do you tell someone that you just saw the future in a brown paper bag? He couldn't stop thinking about it. Even after returning to Illinois, long after the smell of burgers and fresh fries had faded, the image of that little McDonald's in San Bernardino stayed with Ray like a fever dream. The way the workers moved in perfect rhythm, the speed, the consistency, the smiles on the customers' faces. It was more than just a restaurant. It was a machine, a money-printing miracle wrapped in wax paper. And no one seemed to realize it but him. He laid awake most nights, a notepad on the nightstand, sketching ideas in the dark. Arrows, maps, names of cities. Des Plaines, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Detroit. He could see the arches rising across the country like telephone poles. One golden M at a time. Ray picked up the phone and called San Bernardino. Dick McDonald answered. I've been thinking, Ray said, gripping the receiver tightly. This system of yours, what if we scaled it? Really scaled it, franchise it nationwide. Let me be the one to do it. There was a long silence. Ray, Dick replied carefully, we've tried that before. It didn't go well. Because you didn't have the right person running it, Ray said. I believe in this more than anyone. I'll keep your standards. I'll protect the name. Let me prove it. Another pause. We're not looking to build an empire, Dick said, almost with a laugh. We just want to serve good food, fast. Ray pressed on. You've already built the engine. All I want is the keys. They gave in, cautiously. A handshake agreement. A simple contract. He could open new franchises if he agreed to keep the operations strict and the quality tight. Ray hung up the phone with shaking hands. He had no capital, no backers, no guarantee. But he had permission. That was enough. He mortgaged his house, took out loans against his life insurance. Ethel was furious. "You're gambling everything," she said. "On a hamburger stand." Ray didn't argue, because she was right. He was gambling everything. But somewhere deep in his gut, beneath the layers of doubt and fear and years of small-time failure, something was glowing, quiet but unshakable. "I'm not gambling," he said softly. "I'm betting on something real." And so in 1955, in a small suburb outside Chicago, Ray opened his first franchise, McDonald's #1 in Des Plaines, Illinois. Opening day, the sun was shining. A brass band played outside. Red and yellow balloons bounced in the breeze. Ray stood at the entrance in a gray suit, shaking hands with every customer. Inside, the kitchen staff moved like clockwork. Fries down, burgers flipped, bags packed, smiles up. Lines stretched around the block. Children tugged at their parents' hands. The register sang all day long. Ray watched it all unfold with glassy eyes. This wasn't just a restaurant opening, it was a birth. But behind the smiles and success was a growing tension. Ray was only earning a small cut from each franchise. The bulk of the profit went to the McDonald brothers. And while his stores boomed, his bank account bled. He needed a new angle, a smarter way to scale. That's when he had the idea that would change everything. Don't just sell the burgers, own the land beneath them. Because if he could control the property, he could control the business. And with every new lease, Ray Kroc wouldn't just be a franchise agent. He'd become a landlord, a king. One burger stand at a time. That idea was still forming. But for now, as the sun dipped below the golden arches and the last car pulled away, Ray stood in the parking lot, exhausted but lit from within. At 52 years old, he was broke, in debt, sleeping 4 hours a night. And yet, for the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he was going. The stores were growing. The lines were longer. The system worked. On the surface, Ray Kroc was finally winning. But in private, he was drowning. Every new McDonald's franchise he opened brought him applause, but very little money. The contract he had signed with the McDonald brothers gave him only a tiny portion of sales. He was working harder than ever, running between cities, training operators, enforcing quality standards, and yet he was barely staying afloat. Ray paced his office at night, bills in hand, exhaustion in his eyes. "They built the brand," he muttered. "But I'm the one building the business." Something had to change. That's when he met Harry Sonneborn, a financial advisor with a sharp mind and sharper instincts. Ray poured out his frustrations, and Harry listened quietly. Then he leaned back and asked a simple question. "Why are you trying to make money by selling burgers?" Ray blinked. "That's the business I'm in." Harry smiled. "No, Ray, you're in the real estate business. McDonald's isn't just about food, it's about location. Control the land, and you control the empire." The idea hit Ray like a lightning bolt. He moved fast. With Harry's help, he founded a new company, Franchise Realty Corporation, not under the control of the McDonald brothers. This company would buy the land where new McDonald's restaurants would be built. Then, he would lease that land to the franchisees. It was genius. Franchisees needed land to open stores. Ray would provide it, for a price. And if they didn't follow the system to the letter, they risked losing their entire location. For the first time, Ray had leverage. Suddenly, he wasn't just opening stores. He was owning them from the ground up. And with every new plot of land, his power grew. The McDonald brothers didn't see it at first. They were back in California, happy to let Ray handle the operations. But over time, they started to notice changes. Ray was expanding faster than they wanted. He was tweaking procedures, adding training programs, reshaping the brand. He even started calling himself founder in interviews. The brothers sent letters, made calls. They asked him to slow down, but Ray had already tasted the future, and it was golden, fried, and served in a red and yellow bag. "You're thinking small," he told them. "I'm thinking global." The relationship grew tense. Calls turned into arguments, arguments into ultimatums. Finally, in 1961, Ray made an offer: buyout. He would purchase the rights to McDonald's entirely for $2.7 million in cash. Dick and Mac hesitated. It was a fair deal on the surface, enough to retire comfortably, enough to walk away. But it also meant giving up the name, the system, the dream they had built from the ground up. They asked for one thing more, a verbal promise: 1% of the company's annual profits for life. Not in the contract, just a gentleman's agreement. Ray smiled. "Of course," he said. They shook hands. The deal was done. But that 1%? It was never paid. No paperwork. No signatures. Just a handshake. And a memory that would haunt Dick and Mac for the rest of their lives. Ray Kroc, once a desperate salesman on the edge of collapse, now owned everything. The name, the system, the golden arches. And with it, he gained something far more powerful than money: the right to rewrite the story. He would go on to call himself the founder of McDonald's. History books would echo it. And the brothers? Their original restaurant in San Bernardino was eventually shut down, forced out by a McDonald's Ray built just a block away. The very ground beneath them, no longer theirs. He had won. On paper, Ray Kroc now owned everything. The McDonald brothers were gone. Their restaurant, a memory. Their name, his. He had rewritten the story. He was the founder now. And yet, the nights grew quieter. The office grew colder. And for the first time in years, Ray Kroc wasn't building. He was maintaining. He sat alone in his corner office overlooking Chicago, the city lights flickering across the glass, a glass of scotch untouched beside him. On the wall hung a photo of the first Des Plaines store, framed and spotless. Next to it, a newspaper clipping. McDonald's, the fastest-growing chain in America. Everyone called him a genius, a visionary, a titan, but Ray knew the truth. He didn't invent McDonald's, he took it. The pressure never eased. With each new location came higher expectations. Investors wanted more, the board wanted speed. Ray wanted something he couldn't name anymore. He worked himself to exhaustion. He micromanaged menus, supervised ad campaigns, even insisted that pickle placement in sandwiches be measured with rulers. He became obsessed with uniformity. A customer in Wichita, he once said, should get the exact same hamburger as one in Boston, every time. To the world, it was brilliance. To those closest to him, it was control. Ethel, his wife of over 3 decades, could no longer take it. The dinners she once cooked sat cold on the table. Vacations were postponed. Conversations dried up. She had supported him through failure after failure. But now, in his success, she felt invisible. They divorced in silence. No fight, no drama, just a slow fade. Ray remarried shortly after. Her name was Joan. She was younger, vibrant. She believed in him. But more importantly, she believed in what he had become. With Joan, he laughed again. Not often, but sometimes. Enough to remember that life wasn't just about expansion reports and franchise maps. But even then, even in love, Ray never truly rested. Because deep down, he knew what people were saying. He didn't create it. He stole it. He outmaneuvered 2 decent men for profit, and maybe they were right. Years later, during a rare quiet interview, a journalist asked, "Do you regret how it all happened with the McDonald brothers?" Ray looked down at his hands. They were older now, trembled slightly when he held a glass. These were not the hands of a thief, but neither were they innocent. He thought for a long moment. They had the idea, he said finally. But ideas are worthless without execution. He paused, then added more softly, "I didn't just build a restaurant chain. I built a culture, a habit, a promise." But even as he spoke, somewhere in California, Dick and Mac McDonald sat in quiet retirement, forgotten by history, remembered only by those who still visited their little museum of what once was. Ray Kroc had everything: money, power, legacy. And yet, sometimes, alone in the quiet of his mansion, he'd find himself asking, was it worth it? No one could answer that but him, and even he wasn't sure. By the end of the 1960s, McDonald's was no longer a restaurant. It was a phenomenon. There were now hundreds of stores across the country, and more opening every week. The golden arches stood not just on highways and city corners. They rose like modern cathedrals, symbols of speed, simplicity, and the American way. Families planned road trips around them. Children begged their parents for Happy Meals. And Ray Kroc? He was hailed as the genius who had changed how the world ate. Time magazine called him the king of fast food. Business schools dissected his methods. Politicians sought his donations. He had everything he had ever dreamed of. And yet, he felt small. The machine he built had grown too large, too fast. Every decision now went through layers of corporate management. Every campaign required approval from teams he no longer controlled. Stockholders replaced small-town franchisees. Analysts replaced dreamers. Ray Kroc, the man who once scraped grease off the floor in his Des Plaines store, now found himself reading quarterly reports, not flipping patties. He still showed up, still walked the halls in his suit, still toured new locations. But something had changed. McDonald's, he once whispered to Joan, doesn't need me anymore. She placed a hand on his and smiled. That means you did something right. In 1974, he officially stepped down as CEO. The announcement was clean, dignified. A press release, a few handshakes, and a headline. But inside, Ray Kroc was breaking. He spent his mornings wandering the grounds of his estate, his afternoons rereading old franchise manuals, and his nights watching McDonald's commercials on television. Ads he hadn't approved, slogans he hadn't written, smiling faces he didn't recognize. The brand had outgrown the man, and in that strange, quiet way that often happens to visionaries, he became a ghost in his own empire. Still, he refused to fade completely. He focused his energy elsewhere, on charity, on the San Diego Padres baseball team, on perfecting the training systems at Hamburger University. But nothing could replicate the thrill of those early days, of driving across the country with nothing but a milkshake machine and a crazy belief in what could be. He had traded risk for routine, and in doing so, lost a part of himself. One evening, Joan found him sitting in his study, a yellowing blueprint of the first McDonald's store spread across his lap. "You okay?" she asked. Ray nodded, then said quietly, "You know what scares me most?" She waited. That someday, someone will walk into a McDonald's, order a burger, and never wonder where it came from. That night, he stood by the window, looking out at the blinking lights of the city, lights he used to chase, roads he used to ride. And as he held a glass of water to his lips, he whispered to no one, "They'll remember the arches, but they'll never remember the man who made them shine." Ray Kroc was old now. The suits hung looser. The hands shook more. His steps, once fast and firm through bustling McDonald's kitchens, were slow, cautious, deliberate. But his mind? It was still sharp, still haunted. He lived in a beautiful house by the sea with high windows and quiet halls. Joan was his companion, his comfort. She had stayed when others didn't. She knew when to ask, and when to let silence say everything. Most days he sat in his study. A fire, a drink, a view of the ocean that never looked the same twice. And on the table, photographs, franchises, ribbons cut, smiling kids with Happy Meals, celebrities posing beside golden arches, stock charts climbing endlessly upward. Ray looked at them like a man watching someone else's life. Is this all really mine? Did I create it, or just claim it before someone else did? No one could answer that. Not Joan, not the board, not the historians. Only Ray. And even he wasn't sure. Sometimes people would visit. Businessmen, biographers, journalists. They always asked the same questions. What made you believe in McDonald's? How did you outsmart the brothers? Do you regret it? Ray had rehearsed answers, ones that sounded polished, wise, triumphant. But the older he got, the more he abandoned those scripts. "I was desperate," he once admitted to a young writer. "That's where belief starts, you know, when you've got nothing else." The writer blinked. "And the brothers?" Ray looked out the window for a long time. They were good men, he said. But being good doesn't always win. In 1984, at 81 years old, Ray Kroc's body finally gave out. He died quietly in a hospital room in San Diego. No press conference, no red carpet, no trumpets. Just a man, a name, and a legacy so large that it could no longer be measured in years or dollars, but in memories. Children in every country would grow up recognizing those golden arches before they learned to write. A symbol faster than language, brighter than flags. And yet, how many would ever know the name Ray Kroc? Would they know how he struggled in motel rooms with bleeding ulcers? How he sold machines no one wanted for 2 decades? How he gambled his house, his marriage, his reputation, just for a burger system he didn't invent? Would they remember the man, or just the brand? In one of the last notes he ever wrote, Ray scribbled something on hotel stationery. It was never published, never framed. It said, "The quality of a man's life isn't in what he builds, but in whether it outlives him." McDonald's did. It still does, and perhaps that's all Ray Kroc ever really wanted. To be remembered, even if no one quite remembers how.